The Crystal Palace gleamed under the afternoon sun, its grand windows reflecting the meticulously manicured gardens where my brother Michael's wedding guests were gathering. The venue was exclusive, a historic mansion turned luxury event space that usually had a 3-year waiting list. I adjusted my simple black dress designer, though no one would notice, and checked my appearance in one of the antique mirrors. The venue staff bustled around, following my careful instructions from weeks of planning, though they thought those orders came from the real owner. "Hey, little sister." Michael's voice boomed across the marble foyer. "Making yourself useful for once?" I turned to face my brother, resplendent in his designer tuxedo. Behind him, his fiancée Victoria tittered, draped in a gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Someone has to help," I replied quietly. "Since you fired the serving staff at the last minute." "Well, they wanted too much money," Victoria sniffed. "Besides, you're used to this kind of work, aren't you? All those waitressing jobs during college." I bit back a smile, remembering those jobs, cover stories for the nights I spent building my hospitality empire. While they thought I was serving drinks, I was actually buying hotels, restaurants, and exclusive venues like this one. "The guests are arriving," Michael announced. "Make yourself scarce until we need drinks served. And try not to embarrass us. These are important people." Important people. I glanced at the guest list I'd memorized weeks ago. TOs, socialites, business tycoons, half of whom I'd met in boardrooms, though they didn't know the quiet girl in black was the same woman who owned controlling shares in their companies. "Of course," I murmured. "I'll stay out of sight." Our parents swept in, Mom resplendent in an expensive gown, Dad beaming with pride. "There's our boy," Mom gushed, straightening Michael's bow tie. "Everything looks perfect." "Sarah," Dad nodded curtly, barely acknowledging my existence. "At least make yourself useful today." I thought about the letter in my office upstairs, the one detailing how they'd mortgaged their house to pay for this extravagant wedding. The one asking for an extension on payments they couldn't afford. The one addressed to the owner of Crystal Palace Holdings, me. The ceremony proceeded exactly as planned. I stood in the shadows, watching as Michael and Victoria exchanged vows under a flower arch that cost more than my first restaurant. The guests oohed and awed at the opulence, not knowing I'd personally selected every bloom. At the reception, Michael's true colors emerged after a few glasses of champagne, the expensive champagne from my own vineyards in France. "Sarah," he called out, voice carrying across the grand ballroom. "We need more drinks over here. That's what you're good at, right? Serving your betters." Victoria and her bridesmaids laughed, all perfect makeup and cruel smiles. "Remember your place," she stage whispered as I passed with a tray. "The help shouldn't mingle with guests." I caught fragments of conversations as I moved through the crowd. "Poor thing, still working dead-end jobs." "The unsuccessful sister. At least she's useful for something." Each comment strengthened my resolve. The time was perfectly planned. I'd choreographed this moment for months. As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the crystal chandeliers, the venue manager cleared his throat into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption, but I've just received word that the owner of Crystal Palace has arrived." The crowd buzzed with excitement. The owner was famously reclusive, never attending events at any of their properties. "An owner?" Michael scoffed. "Some stuffy old business type, I'm sure." I handed my serving tray to a nearby staff member and slowly walked toward the center of the room. My Louboutin heels clicked against the marble floor, no longer trying to stay silent. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sudden hush, "the owner is already here." The manager smiled, bowing slightly. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Ms. Sarah Chin, owner of Crystal Palace Holdings and the entire Luminous Hospitality Group." The sound of shattering glass echoed through the ballroom as Michael dropped his champagne flute. And I was just getting started. The silence in the grand ballroom was deafening. I could see the realization slowly dawning on hundreds of faces. The help they'd been mocking was actually their hostess. Victoria's perfect makeup couldn't hide her rapidly paling complexion. That's impossible," Michael stammered. "You're a waitress. A nobody." I smiled, slowly removing the simple black cardigan to reveal my custom Alexander McQueen dress underneath. "Actually, I own 37 luxury venues across 3 continents. This estate is just one of them. Walking to the center of the room, I gestured to the ornate surroundings. The chandeliers you're dining under? Imported from my glassworks in Venice. The wine you're drinking? My vineyards in Bordeaux. The caviar you enjoyed during cocktail hour? My sustainable fishery in the Caspian Sea. The crowd murmured, recognition flickering across faces. Many of them had dealt with my companies, never knowing the owner's true identity. Ms. Chin, a prominent Zo, stepped forward. I had no idea. We just finalized that resort deal in Dubai last week. Over video conference, I finished smoothly. Though you thought you were speaking to my boss, while I took notes. Victoria stumbled forward, her wedding dress rustling. But we booked this venue through an agency. We paid a fortune. Did you? I pulled out my phone, pulling up some figures. Actually, you paid a deposit. The balance was due last week. Funny how that payment never arrived. Mom stepped forward, wringing her hands. We were going to sort that out. By taking out another mortgage? I asked quietly. On top of the 3 you already can't afford. Dad's face reddened. How dare you discuss our private finances? I cut him off. You mean the ones where you remortgaged your house 5 times to fund Michael's failed business ventures? Or the credit cards you maxed out to pay for this wedding? Those private matters. The manager appeared at my side with a leather portfolio. The final bill, Ms. Chin, as requested. I opened it, displaying the 6-figure sum. Would anyone like to explain how this was going to be paid? Michael's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. You set us up. You knew we couldn't afford this. No, I corrected coldly. I gave you exactly what you asked for. Every extravagant demand, every last-minute change, every luxury upgrade. You never once questioned how you got a venue that's booked 3 years in advance. Never wondered why the deposit was so suspiciously low. Victoria burst into tears, mascara running. This is supposed to be my perfect day. Perfect. I laughed softly. Like the perfect lies you've been telling about your family's wealth? Or the perfect story about how you met Michael, leaving out the part where you were actually dating his best man first. The best man in question choked on his champagne. You see, I continued, walking through the stunned crowd, when you own properties like this you hear things. Staff talk. Guests gossip. And I've been collecting every detail, every secret, every hidden truth. I stopped in front of my parents. Like how you told everyone I was working dead-end jobs because I couldn't handle college, when in reality, I was building an empire worth billions. Billions? Dad whispered. The Luminous Hospitality Group's current market value is $4.8 billion, I stated flatly. You'd know that if you ever bothered to read the business section instead of just bragging about Michael's latest startup ideas. The crowd was absolutely silent now, watching the family drama unfold like a high-stakes theater production. So, I announced, turning to address the guests, I have an announcement to make about this wedding. Michael stepped forward, desperation in his eyes. Sarah, please. But I wasn't done. Not even close. This wedding, I announced, my voice carrying through the silent ballroom, has an interesting story behind it. One the happy couple hasn't shared with their guests. Victoria grabbed Michael's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his sleeve. Don't you dare. 3 months ago, I continued, walking up the grand staircase for better effect. When they came to book this venue, they presented themselves as the children of billionaire industrialists. Claimed they had connections to European royalty. Even suggested they were doing the venue a favor by choosing us. I paused, letting the words sink in. Several guests, actual billionaires and aristocrats, shifted uncomfortably. The truth. I clicked a remote, and the ballroom's screens lit up with financial documents. They don't have a cent to their names. The deposit was paid with a fraudulent check. The guest list? Half of you were invited because they thought they could scam investments for Michael's newest venture. That's not true. Michael shouted, but his voice cracked. Really? I raised an eyebrow. Should we discuss the investment packets in the gift bags? The ones promising 300% returns on a tech startup that doesn't exist. Several guests hurriedly opened their gift bags, finding the glossy prospectuses inside. Or perhaps, I continued, we should talk about the real reason for the rushed wedding? Victoria's father's embezzlement charges go to court next week, don't they? Victoria burst into fresh tears, her dream wedding crumbling around her. Sarah, Mom stepped forward. Please, we can explain. Explain what? I descended the stairs slowly. How you mortgaged your house to fund this facade. How Dad's been forging loan documents using his old bank connections. Or how Michael's been selling fake shares in companies he doesn't own. The crowd gasped. Several prominent business figures were already pulling out their phones, presumably calling their lawyers. But here's the truly interesting part. I reached the bottom step. Despite everything, the lies, the mockery, the years of treating me like a servant, I'm going to give you a choice. I nodded to the manager who distributed envelopes to my family members. Option 1, I explained. I press charges. Investment fraud, check fraud, loan fraud, all of it. The evidence has already been forwarded to the SEC and FBI, pending my final decision. Michael ripped open his envelope, his hands shaking. Option 2, I continued. You all enter a rehabilitation program. Financial counseling, psychiatric evaluation, job training, paid for by me, through a strictly controlled trust. Job training. Victoria sneered, though her voice trembled. We're not poor people who need. Actually, I cut in, you are. As of this morning, I own your family's remaining assets, Victoria. Your father signed them over in exchange for his legal defense. Her face went ghostly white. Michael, that startup you've been pitching? I own the patents you were trying to steal. Dad, that bank you've been defrauding? I'm their largest shareholder. Mom, those charity boards you chair? I fund them all. I turned to address the guests. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this disruption. Your gifts will be returned, any investments cancelled, and I'm happy to provide transportation home. Consider the evening an object lesson in due diligence. As the guests began filing out, many stopping to slip me business cards or whisper congratulations, I faced my family one last time. You have 24 hours to decide, I stated flatly. Rehabilitation or prosecution. Either way, the lies end today. Why? Michael asked, his voice small. Why let us choose it all? I looked at him, really looked at him, seeing not the successful businessman he pretended to be, but the scared little boy who'd always needed to feel superior. Because someone once told me I was only good for serving drinks, I replied softly. And I proved them wrong by building something real instead of living a lie. Walking to the grand entrance, I paused. The trust offers one chance. Choose wisely. And if we choose rehabilitation? Mom called out. I turned back one final time. Then you'll learn what I learned, that real success isn't about appearances or status or lies. It's about building something meaningful, even if you have to start by serving drinks. As I left the ruined wedding, my heels clicking on marble floors I owned, I heard Victoria's wail. But who's going to pay for all this? I smiled, knowing the bill would arrive tomorrow, along with federal investigators if they chose poorly. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just revealing the truth, it's forcing others to finally face it. And I'd learned long ago that the most powerful person in any room isn't the one being served. It's the one who owns the room itself. The following morning, I sat in my real office, the penthouse suite of the Crystal Palace's executive wing, reviewing the aftermath of last night's revelations. Emma, my longtime assistant who'd helped orchestrate everything, laid out the morning reports. The media's already caught wind of it, she noted, sliding over several tabloid headlines. Though they're focusing more on Victoria's father's scandal than the wedding itself. And the guests? I asked, sipping my espresso. Most have signed the NDAs we offered, agreeing to keep the family drama private in exchange for generous compensation. Though several CEOs have requested private meetings with you, apparently they're impressed by how you built your empire in secret. A soft knock interrupted us. Miss Chin? They're here. I checked the time, 9 a.m. sharp. At least they could follow one simple instruction. Send them in. My family filed in, looking considerably different from last night. Gone were the designer clothes and false bravado. Michael wore an off-the-rack suit that actually fit him, while Victoria had removed her fake extensions and excessive makeup. Mom and Dad looked like they'd aged a decade overnight. Please sit, I gestured to the chairs arranged before my desk. As they settled, I noticed their hands clutching identical envelopes, their responses to my ultimatum. Before you speak, I held up a hand. Let me show you something. I pressed a button and the office's windows transformed into display screens, showing various properties around the world: hotels, resorts, restaurants, entertainment venues. This is what I built while you thought I was failing, I explained. Every time you mocked my waitressing, I was actually overseeing location openings. When you excluded me from family events, I was closing international deals. While you were crafting lies about success, I was creating actual success. All of these are yours? Dad whispered. Wine. Built from scratch, no lies, no fraud, no shortcuts. I leaned forward. Now your decisions? One by one they placed their envelopes on my desk. All marked, option 2. Wise choice, I nodded. Here's what happens next. I distributed new folders to each of them. Michael, you'll start in maintenance at our smallest hotel. Victoria, you're assigned to housekeeping. Mom and Dad, you'll both work in our entry-level customer service department. All positions include mandatory financial counseling and therapy sessions. Maintenance. Michael sputtered. Housekeeping. Honest work, I corrected. Something none of you have ever tried. You'll learn every aspect of the hospitality business from the ground up, just like I did. Victoria opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. Your alternative is federal prison. Choose carefully. She snapped her mouth shut. You'll be provided modest apartments in staff housing. Your wages will be garnished to repay debts. Any attempt to contact your former social circles or resume your fraudulent activities will result in immediate termination of this arrangement and full prosecution. How long? Mom asked quietly. That depends on you. Show me you can change, really change, and opportunities for advancement will follow. Prove you've learned the value of honest work, and perhaps one day you'll earn positions worthy of your actual abilities rather than your imagined importance. I stood, walking to the window that overlooked the garden where just hours ago they'd been celebrating their fake perfect lives. Consider this your second chance. Your only chance. The lies, the fraud, the pretense, it all ends now. And what about? Michael hesitated. Us? As a family,